everybody? Welcome to BioS3 Raw TV. We're here today on Unfiltered with Mike Dolce. Mike, it's good to meet you finally, man. Been a big fan for a long time. And it's kind of funny because I made the video about Ronda Rousey being overpaid. And the owner of Primeval says, hey, man, some dude put up a video saying why Ronda wasn't overpaid, and it was addressed to you. And I'm like, who? And he goes, I don't know. And he sends me the link. So we watched the video. I was like, no shit, that's pretty cool. So actually, thank you for making that video. It was actually kind of eye-opening, and you did it like in such a classy way. Like, you know, a lot of people just go and attack people back online, and I was like, that was pretty cool that you did that.
No, well, I knew, you know, you had a great point, and your point actually reflects the sentiment of most of the MMA population who doesn't know some of the behind-the-scenes financials. Right. So you kind of gave me a great platform to speak to a broader audience and tell them, no, hey, guys, here's how this stuff really works. These are what these athletes are paying. And the athletes don't disclose because they don't want their aunts, uncles, brothers, cousin calling them up looking for some extra cash on the side.
Is that why they really do it?
What's that?
Is that why they really do it like that?
That's a big part of it. It's why they have these undisclosed payouts for sure. And I know that's more, you know, specific to the UFC because Dana and Lorenzo, when they first kind of started the concept, they knew how it was going to be, and they do protect the fighters in many ways, you know, back when Lorenzo and Frank Fertitta were still there. But I did want to say, I've been a huge fan of yours for years, man. I'm a subscriber to your channel. I've been following all your stuff. So when I saw you, I was like, oh, well, here's a cool way I can kind of engage with Jerry a little bit. I'm not really a big YouTube guy. We just do a little bit here and there on our YouTube channel. We're a little more on social media and stuff. So it was a cool way to engage. And here we are. Now we're talking, man. Now we're old friends.
We both have great haircuts. That's the thing, man. Yeah. Let's dive right into this. How much has nutrition changed in MMA since you've been involved with MMA?
You know, when I first got involved in MMA, this is in the late 90s. So I was working for Team Renzo Gracie back on the East Coast with Renzo and Ricardo Almeida, Kurt Pellegrino, Dante Rivera, some of these, you know, beasts in their own time. Back when it was still no holds barred fighting. So the unified rule set didn't come in of mixed martial arts. There was none of that. It was still NHB, human cockfighting. When I was working inside of the MMA world, the Zuffa, Dana White, and the Fertitta brothers hadn't even bought the UFC yet. So that's kind of when early 90s is when I really got involved and started kind of, you know, working my way through. And to see where it's come now, it was very bodybuilding centric, like we all were. Flex Magazine, Muscle and Fitness, Iron Man, you know, Muscle National, all those were kind of the early day mainstays before the internet took off. And I believe, and I'll be, you know, a little braggadocious here, I believe our methodology, our approach to longevity-based nutrition really did help change the tide. MMA fighters were so bodybuilding specific in their nutrition and also in their strength and conditioning because they didn't have any other resource. So we were able to come back in with this whole foods, earth-grown approach to longevity to really get athletes eating real food again. They were just living on the pills, the powders, the potions, and the supplements early on.
So now, as far as supplements, you mentioned supplements. You know, I mean, bodybuilding, obviously, there's a huge industry full of supplements. And you're seeing some of the MMA fighters starting to cross over and be at these events and stuff. What supplements are the MMA guys using as opposed to like the bodybuilding supplements? Like I know a lot of athletes use stuff like branched chains, or they use like Gatorade, which is, you know, as far as we're concerned, like in the Stone Ages. Because I see it all the time at my gym. We have people from the NBA come in, they're drinking Gatorade, and I'm like, do you know about highly branched cluster dextrin? And they're like, what? You know, so what are they using now as far as like MMA supplements?
You know, most of the MMA guys and girls, they're really focused more on the damage they're doing to their body. They're not focused more on the muscle building agents, growth hormone releasers, pre-workout, post-workout. They're focused more on their joints, their connective tissue. So you're seeing lots of different, you know, chondroitin, MSM, you know, fish oils, products like that are more prominent inside the MMA world. A lot more vegan, plant-based products inside the MMA world. Not because the MMA athletes are vegan at all, because it feels and seems healthier. So you'll see less of the MMA athletes unless they're getting paid. They're not really using – some are using like a whey protein isolate, a basic whey protein post-workout. That's pretty common. But most of the bodybuilding-centric workouts, they're not beta-alanines and branch chains. They're pretty much not using a ton of that. God, I'm pulled away now from the bodybuilding world to a degree. I don't know what all the new formulas and the hot, what's the hot new seller out there right now. I'm kind of out of that, but much more about, connective tissue. I think that's really the most important thing with most of the MMA guys and girls.
So they're not using collagen supplements, which seems kind of strange.
Collagen supplement, well, that's relatively new. Collagen as far as like a collagen protein.
Yeah, exactly.
Or relatively new, right? So in the last year or two, that's become more popular. MMA athletes are notoriously cheap, probably like all athletes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Stuff's super expensive.
So,
yeah.
It is. And I know Vitality is the company that's out there right now kind of taking over that market.
I think that's in the collagen peptides I think they have. But the collagen supplement in general, I mean, we don't have a food source of collagen. So when you're not taking collagen, it's hard to repair joints, and they take MSM and chondroitin and all this stuff, and they're like, well, it works, but not as good as it could because they're missing that foundation of the collagen that needs to go in. But again, it's so expensive that some guys, if they have a choice between, the MSM chondroitin, they're going to go with that rather than, a collagen supplement. And you run through it really fast, too.
They're buying it at Walgreens for like $6.99. They're buying the cheap version. It's placebo effect more than anything else. That's why we always push back to nutrition first.
So how much above these fighters? Now, your whole thing is really diet-based, and I'm the diet guy. Like, I realized, it actually had to be hammered into me years and years and years. Like, Jay Cutler was a good friend of mine starting early on, and he was like, make sure you're eating clean foods and you're doing this. And I was like, yeah, and I go right to McDonald's. Like, I wouldn't listen because I was young and I didn't know. And then over time, I realized that it was like 80% diet. You know what I mean? Like, you had to stay lean in the off season. You couldn't really bulk up and get fat because then you'd have to diet it off. And I became much more focused on the diet and learning how that stuff worked, which is pretty much how you are. Yeah. How much above the fighting weight do you recommend for these guys to stay for their optimal? Because, I mean, you got to be able to train hard in the off season, but if you're too heavy, then you're not training optimally to get what you need for the fight time.
Yeah, I think the individual physiology does matter, what the athlete's normal propensity is. Do they gain fat? I gain fat relatively easy. So for someone like me, I want to stay a little leaner, a little lighter, closer to, though I don't compete, my competitive weight. Some athletes, man, they just swell. Their muscles just absorb and volumize relatively easy. Mirsad Bektik is one of our guys. He's a good example of that. He fights at 145. He gets up to 180 with abs. I mean, he could walk onto a classic physique stage and do pretty damn well. And then we get him all the way down to 145. Really with no harm at all. We'll get him walking around in the low 160s about 3 weeks before competition, feeling great. So they say, 20 pounds is the cap. Any athlete that get 20 pounds above their weight class, they're starting to get into some sloppy issues. But at the same time, even if they're not sloppy, you have to worry about the water cut, the dehydration, because unlike, physique athletes, mixed martial artists, they're going to get kicked in the skull.
Yeah.
It's bad enough when you're on a physique stage completely dehydrated, but if you're dehydrated and you have head trauma, it's just a bad recipe for a lifelong, health issue.
And I've seen these guys cut like 20 or 30 pounds in a day. Like they hop in the sauna. I mean, they're not doing this stuff anymore, are they?
Yeah, they are.
Really?
Yeah, it's Jerry. It's so archaic, and I try and be vocal as I can about it. The weight cut starts 52 weeks before competition in the ideal state, right? As you said, the athlete's staying leaner, they're staying lighter, they're staying closer to their competitive weight. They're fueling their body with the vital micronutrition they need to thrive within their given sport. A lot of these athletes, man, they yo-yo so far, so high up, so high down, or so low down, that they're making these massive weight cuts. They're storing a massive amount of body fat, and then they have to go even deeper into the dehydration phase to pull that water off. That's not what you want to do before any competition, let alone combat. That's insane.
Yeah. Now, have any of these, because you don't hear about it, a lot of stuff that happens like behind the scenes in bodybuilding, and I'm sure MMA is the same way. Have any of these guys actually died from cutting weight like that? Like, we've had guys drop dead because they dehydrated themselves. They, of course, in bodybuilding, tons of prescription diuretics, which take things, way too far. But have any of these guys, I mean, I'm sure they've wound up in the hospital, been rehydrated, but have they actually died?
There's one story I know about that comes out of Brazil. A young man did die in Brazil while cutting weight. Now, I don't know what the autopsy is, the toxicology report. I don't know, although I do have suspicions that there was either some sort of genetic issue and or some sort of pharmacological issue that could have played a role in this. So I don't know for sure, but I'm making an assumption here. but he did in fact die while cutting weight, and they said that he was stuffed into a sauna. So he was basically trying to cut all his weight in some 180-degree cedar box, cooking himself to the point of complete collapse and system shutdown. That's why we never, ever, ever, ever use saunas. So with our system, we never use saunas. We never, ever go in a sauna, specifically not when we're cutting weight. Maybe 3 weeks out, maybe, while fully hydrated as a way to rest and recover. But if you're cutting your weight in the sauna, you already fucked up. You screwed up.
Right. That's crazy. Now, back in, there was Sean Shirk's day, there was Matt Hughes and those guys. The physiques are way different now. Like, they're completely different. And, of course, testing procedures get better, and the more people test positive, the more guys actually stop taking it or whatever. But how has drug use changed, and what are the things that people test positive for? You only hear about stuff like, random things that they test positive for, like not the steroids that they used to test positive for before, like nandrolone and stuff like that. And I think it was Rich Piana that I was talking to, and he was like, if I was an MMA fighter, he goes, I wouldn't take steroids and stuff. He's like, I'd take a shot of meth or something and come out and just try to, kill the guy in the first 30 seconds. And I was like, that kind of makes sense. I was like, he goes, think about how pumped you get when you're trying to hold onto a weight. Because if you're trying to hold someone in a chokehold on those steroids, he's like, you can't even hold on. Like, your grip just lets go. So, like, what are some of the things the guys are testing positive for now as opposed to, 10 years ago?
Well, it's funny because I've actually been at two. It was in Oregon in the early 2000s. There were some guys that were using meth to go out there and compete. Problem was they were so spastic that they had so much energy. They were so spastic. They had energy the entire time. They would just get out techniqued and worked over. They couldn't settle down and focus. So Rich's point is interesting, but that the pendulum swings too far the other way, right? Now, what are they getting busted for most? So since the advent of USADA, which is about 2 years old now inside the UFC, which is the most sophisticated drug testing protocol in all of professional sports, we actually match the Olympics here in the UFC, which is awesome. Unfortunately, as a result of USADA coming in, these athletes are trying new drugs, synthetic drugs. They're going to these, drug gurus, if you will, and they're going more into the peptides, more into the SARMs. They're trying to find ways to get around the USADA system, not realizing that you can't. Right. I mean, some athletes can, some do, but those are the athletes that are at the much higher pay scale that they can get the sophisticated Lance Armstrong style of testing systems and doping systems around them. The world of MMA simply doesn't have the money right now. 10 years from now, maybe they will. Conor's about the only guy that could probably afford that, and I do believe Conor is a clean athlete. I don't work with him. Earlier, pre-USADA, it was more of the basic. It was just guys taking tests, which we could argue is much safer. And there was the TRT, the therapeutic use exemption to take testosterone replacement therapy. Now, that was inside of the UFC and inside of MMA for quite a few years. And people argued about that and argued how bad it is, doping and doping and doping and all this stuff. So they took it away. Well, it's like prohibition. Exactly. The athletes are going to something else to jump into. And I'm on the fence that here's a way that's at least regulated. You're checking the athlete's blood work. Vitor Belfort's a good example. You know exactly what his blood looks like. You know exactly what he's taking. He's exactly under a doctor's care. I don't believe Vitor has doped since that went away because you see the dramatic change to his physique. But other athletes definitely have. And then we'll go, before I close, a lot of these athletes now, they use this tainted supplement bullshit fucking excuse. You and I both know if we walk into the local nutrition shop, there's going to be a bottle of something behind the counter that's gray market. Yeah. That we know there's something in there that's going to give us the boost. You probably remember, you're the same age as me, the old Russian Bear supplements in the early days that had the fucking D-ball sprinkled in. Every high school kid I know is running to GNC to buy that shit.
Hot stuff in the Russian Bear, yeah.
Right? Exactly. So we knew that was going on. These athletes know the same thing. And here's my example. I'm not a pro-drug guy. I'm not an anti-drug guy. I am pro-regulation. So if the drugs are banned inside the sport, then the laws of the sport should reflect that. And I believe in a lifetime suspension. Yeah. If you get busted one time, you're gone for life. That will stop doping immediately. But no, they play these games in the first offense, second offense, third offense, sliding scales, little bit of money floats back to the commission, 6 months. I mean, Anderson Silva came back from a steroid suspension in a year where Nick Diaz, 2 years later, still hasn't competed from a marijuana suspension. That's bullshit.
Yeah. There was an actual football player. His name was Mike Cloud. and he was from Portsmouth, Rhode Island. I was from Warren. He was from Portsmouth, and he wound up playing for the New England Patriots. And he got popped for, I believe it was nandrolone that he got popped for. And literally, he was like, I don't even know what's going on. And he told them it was Nitrotech by MuscleTech. And what they did was they went directly to GNC and they pulled the products off the shelves, the 3 GNCs, they tested them, and it had norandrostenedione in it, which was the precursor in the Nitrotech, but it wasn't on the label. And he went through a big lawsuit because the Patriots released him, and he was, it was all I don't think he ever played again, but he won all the lawsuits against MuscleTech and all that stuff. And I remember thinking, wait a minute, that stuff's in Nitrotech? I got to go to GNC right now because, I need to get it before they pull it off the shelf. But I mean, it was literally one of those things. Like, I'm going to get 10, 12 bottles of that stuff. But like, everybody was like, there's no way, because he was always a big kid. So we're like, there's no way, he's definitely taken something. And, it turned out that, that was like the one instance I've ever heard of that actually turned out that the guy was clean and, that it was a tainted supplement. And MuscleTech was like, oh, we don't know. We have no idea. All the things were tainted. And they also went through that thing with, it was the hydroxycut that was tainted with some kind of thing in their fat burner that, was causing liver issues. Of course, it was high. I think it was usnic acid that was in it. It was a really big fat burner. So the FDA was like, so you have a extreme fat burner in your fat burner that causes problems, and you don't know how it got there. So yeah, that was like the beginning of the end for MuscleTech back in the day. Do you think these not new athletes, but the athletes nowadays understand that nutrition is playing a huge key in them getting to the next level?
They understand it, but they still dismiss it. My experience working with most athletes and most elite teams, they have very little understanding of periodization. They don't understand waving volume and intensity for the benefit of the athlete. You look at how many injuries these athletes have, and then you go through their social media feed, you look at the training sessions that they're enduring on their way to compete. They don't understand how to peak. Now, I get into very professional yet heated debates with a lot of the teams that I work with because they want the athlete training their ass off as hard as they can every single day, literally leading up until the day they step on the scale. I have coaches trying to get their athletes to do 5-minute rounds of pad work, of grappling, of sparring even during fight week while they're cutting 10, 12, 15, 20 pounds, reduce calories, high levels of stress. There's no deload built into this. The athletes understand food from, and I'm generalizing here. There's a few outliers, athletes like Carlos Condit or Mirsad Bektik or Ronda Rousey even, who do understand the importance of food as a fuel source. Most only see it as a reward and punishment as they make their way onto the scale. Then you see these massive binges. A guy like Johnny Hendricks, who I love, he's a good man, but you see in his struggles on the scale, he's missed 4 out of his last 5 weigh-ins, unfortunately, bumping up. That's because he has a disordered relationship with food. Most athletes do, specifically most wrestlers do. If you're an amateur wrestler, we're all disordered when it comes to that. And, Jerry, this is a tough one. Guys like you, guys like myself, Rob Wolf is out there. There's some of us in the industry that we're actually talking about the tenets of eating real food and how important real food is to fuel these human organisms that we are. A lot of the athletes think they can jump over that with an extra hard training session, an extra sprint session on the Airdyne, go sit in the sauna and suck it up, and then they can sneak in and have a burger, a McDonald's or a Shake Shack or whatever the burger is, because it's a half pound. It only weighs 8 ounces. Therefore, it's only going to add 8 ounces of scale weight. And that's the disordered thinking they're suffering from. What's
weird is, talking about like the human machine, like what you put in it is going to make what you can power output, recovery, everything work better. And we're seeing, of course, I got to use him as the example, Tom Brady, playing at an extremely high level, and he changed all his ways of eating and the way he trained and recovery, and he's doing all these different things to try to make his body last longer. And he's doing it. And I say, okay, well, that's, that makes sense. Like, it makes a whole lot of sense why you should, not everybody's going to eat organic, but if you had a choice between organic chicken and non-organic, which one would you think would be better? The organic chicken. It's just that simple. And a lot of people think it's a scam and stuff. And then I say, okay, well, you got these people that are excelling, and this is what they're doing. The people that are not excelling, and this is what they're doing. So it doesn't make sense why you wouldn't just try what the other people are doing and say, okay, if he did something that's never really been done before, like Tom Brady playing into his 40s and, winning these Super Bowls and stuff, like, it's not a drug because everybody would find that drug. Everybody at some point would be on it, and they would be, if it was growth hormone, half those guys are taking growth hormone to begin with. So what's the point? And
They're all taking it.
everybody's on it. I mean, Peyton Manning recovered from his surgery in like 3 days. He had like a reconstructive surgery. He was like throwing a ball like a week later. Emmitt Smith, I remember, tore his hamstring, and he played like 2 games later. I mean, these things. It's always been around, but they still refuse to believe that diet is that important because, again, the disordered eating. They don't want to. If you told somebody with cancer, if you went on a keto diet, it'll slow down the progression of your cancer, and they like cookies a lot. More than likely, like I'd say, maybe 8 out of 10 of those people won't be able to give up those cookies, even though it will kill them faster than if they didn't have it.
Absolutely. On that point, 2 out of 3 people listening to this right now will die of lifestyle-related illness.
Yeah.
Right? 2 out of 3 Americans will die of lifestyle-related illness. That's not getting hit by a bus or a piano falling on your head like the Bugs Bunny cartoons. That's the shit you put into your body. That's the external environments with which you put yourself into will contribute to your death at an early stage of life, earlier than you should have, and in a much more terrible way. So, to your point, the people that are eating the cookies that have cancer are eating cookies 100%. So can you imagine the people that don't yet have cancer, what they're shoveling into their mouth as if it's okay? And they think, well, hey, everybody else does it. And we always push back and say, but 2 out of 3 of these idiots are going to fucking die because of it. Like, don't you want to be that change? And to Tom Brady stuff, you and I and hopefully maybe your audience, because you've been putting this information out there for a long time, we understand that clean food is real food. When I say organic, I don't necessarily mean that USDA organic logo, because there's a lot of commercialization in that, and there's a lot of bureaucracy in that. When I say organic, I mean earth-grown. I mean food that was born of this earth unmolested by man in its natural state. That's what we want to be eating. I want to walk into my backyard. I want to pull a fish out of the stream, rip an apple out of the tree, and dig a potato out of the ground in its most natural form and consume that as close to its most natural form as possible. By doing that, I'm ensuring maximum micronutrient density while consuming a lower total caloric load. I'm getting more of the essential nutrients I need with the fewest possible calories that I have to consume. I use the apple and the donut analogy. A medium apple and one regular plain donut both have about 100 total calories. How many of us can eat 6 or 12 donuts in a sitting, no problem, be hungry afterwards? How many of us ever eat more than 2 apples ever without kind of feeling full and being good? It's eating that Tom Brady style diet, that Jerry Ward, that Dolce style diet, where you're eating real food. You're now giving your body all the nutrients it needs to sustain, to thrive. It just makes fucking sense. And Tom Brady getting bashed for feeding his kids quinoa or making brownies by these idiots. He's Tom fucking Brady. He's got a supermodel wife. He's got one of the most successful athletes in human history. He's living the life that we all wish we had. And we're going to criticize the way he's done it? Are you kidding me?
I think a lot of people, it would change their lifestyle drastically. It's more expensive, and I think that actually is a cop-out. But until so I think it was like 2014 when I tore my rotator cuff, I decided I'm not going to carry the extra weight while I'm not training. I'm just going to eat better and get lean and stay there for a while. And I started eating cleaner, quote unquote cleaner. And I noticed after a few weeks I started to actually feel better. But I didn't know I was feeling bad until I started to feel better. So then when I started to eat a little crappy again, I felt like shit. And then I could tell, I'm like, shit, when I eat this food that I normally used to eat, I don't feel good. And if I'm doing everything in my life to feel good, like you sleep to feel good, you take a vacation to feel good, people do drugs to feel good, you have sex to do good, everything is to feel good, why the hell am I going to eat this shit that's making me not feel good? So I kind of continue that trend. And then, my wife has always kind of eaten this way. I was her trainer for like 8 or 9 years before we actually got together. So it was kind of like we would have these discussions like, do you remember when you used to eat this? Yeah, like I felt like such shit, but I had no idea. And then we'll watch our friends, eat, like people at work and stuff eat. And I'm like, do you have, like, they're all inflamed, their faces are puffy. I'm like, don't you guys feel like shit? And they're like, no, I feel fine. I'm like, it's because you don't know that you feel like shit. You've been there for so long, you don't know it. And until you really kind of clean things up, you don't realize it. But, I kind of shifted away from the, a calorie is a calorie, and, a Wendy's piece of chicken is the same thing as a piece of chicken from Whole Foods. And even when we go to Mexico, the chicken in Mexico is even different than the chicken we get here. It's a lot, you process it differently, it tastes different, it looks different, everything about it is different because they literally just took the chicken out of the backyard, killed it, and put it on your plate. They didn't fill it with all kinds of chemicals and stuff like that. So why don't you explain to us what the Dolce, I see the big sign back there, the Dolce Diet, and what it is and how you came up with it.
So the Dolce Diet is a longevity-based approach to immediate performance and cosmetic improvement. What we do is we use narcissism, we use vanity as the Trojan horse to change people's lives long term. We're known for working with the world's greatest athletes. We have multiple world champions. We have multiple Olympic medalists. We have multiple NFL, NBA, all those great athletes, and they give us a little bit of shine. They give us a little bit of sizzle. What they do more than anything else for us is they get the regular public, which I am one of. I'm just a regular old Joe, husband, father, business owner. I'm a regular fucking dude swinging the axe every day trying to chop down these trees. We try and take the information and that shine, the sizzle of the elite athletes, and we use that information to push back down onto the population and say, hey, this is how Ronda Rousey eats. Why don't you eat like that? Like, do you want to perform better? Do you want to look better? Do you want to feel better? Well, this is what the elite athletes do to compete at that scale. And they're eating chili, they're eating pasta, they're eating burgers, they're having French fries. We're making some tweaks to it. We're switching out the canola oil. We're using avocado oil. We're not using, vegetable oil fried French fries. We're, sweet potato baked with cinnamon and some raw honey. We're deconstructing some of these recipes to allow that same flavor, that same emotional, that social, psychological enjoyment while still fulfilling our micronutrient needs. Now, over time, I started out, I'm a fucking meathead, man. I'm a meathead, right? I mean, look at us. We're like fucking twins. I'm in the gym. Bending barbells as a kid. I'm 13 years old, powerlifting with the strongest dudes in my gym, which were very high level, state level powerlifting. I didn't have genetics for bodybuilding, and I knew that right out of the gate. But I was a strong kid, and I was a wrestler. That's all I wanted to do. I was more on the combat sports side, strength sports side. But I trained with guys like Rich Gaspari, Johnny Moran, Eddie Albert, like the East Coast old school bodybuilders. I was like the kid in their pack changing weights, learning from these motherfuckers, getting as strong as and then eventually stronger than these dudes, grinding up through. So it was all about like eat and mass. And I managed the GNC in high school and then the early, college days, just trying to keep the money going through the education there. Meathead, Joe Weider's fucking Mass Gainer 2000, all the Twin Lab products. I was there before Metrics and Bill Phillips came through with the EA and the HMB and the creatine and all that stuff. So I've seen all that stuff come through, and I tested and tried it all. Through my own course, my own journey. Now, as a powerlifter, I got up to 282 pounds at 5'10". Insane. At that size, I was strong as hell, and I was unhealthy as hell. Went to the doctor. I've told this story before. Went to the doctor, blood pressure done, blood pressure off the charts, cholesterol off the charts, sleep apnea, heart palpitations. I'm in my mid-20s. That's where the Dolce Diet went from sports nutrition to optimal nutrition. Immediately, it was like, holy shit. My father, had heart issues, died of a massive stroke and a heart attack at the same time. Terrible. My mother's side, there's diabetes, runs rampant on my mother's side. I looked at all the cofactors that are swirling around me in my life. So what am I doing? And I'm coaching elite athletes at that point in my mid-20s. A lot more on the combat side, a lot of wrestlers, high school collegiate wrestlers, powerlifters, local bodybuilders, track athletes, things like that. Immediately, I made that pivot, made that switch. I brought my body weight from 282, eventually all the way down to 169, where I did compete, at the professional level in the Ultimate Fighter Series and the IFL. And I had a journeyman style career, but it was more bucket list for me. So I lost 110 plus pounds while taking this route and then competing as a professional fighter. That's really difficult to do, to make that body type change. And I give this to you guys to give context. We've used this science. Now we have a team of registered dietitians and exercise physiologists and certified strength and conditioning specialists here in office on staff that work with us. So we have a pretty comprehensive team. I'm the one with the energy and the bobblehead kind of bouncing around that most people identify with the Dolce Diet. But I have a team of very smart, very sophisticated individuals, and we are always pushing the boundaries of what is known and what is possible while maintaining health. Our first rule is do no harm. I mean, that's what it goes back to, right? Hippocrates. Do no harm first and foremost. Every athlete we work with, every client we work with, we want them to be 120 years old. That's the base we start on. So we don't do anything that risks them being 120 years old, showing their great-great-grandchildren the photos and the medals of when they won that UFC world title, of when they won the Olympic Games, of when they were in their best shape, when they met their great-great-grandfather or whatnot. That's our moral cause. I think that's the core culture here. We're a service industry, or we're a service-based company. We're here to serve the public, almost like a missionary would be, to not get too kind of off topic of being a meathead. We want to change the population. We want to change the paradigm. We want to teach people, re-educate people on how to eat. Earth-grown nutrients have sustained all of life on this planet since the dawn of time. You cannot tell me in the last 50 years these scientists and these corporate, accountants have come up with better ways to do that, because they simply have not. And if we track the statistics of what all-cause mortality is, of what diabetes is, of what obesity is, of what heart disease is, we see these cofactors just jumping in line with the new, the new industrial revolution, I like to call it, of what's currently being put into the marketplace. That's kind of a long way of putting in what we do here.
I mean, those GMOs, I've actually looked at the literature myself, and they can show man-made diseases that actually started to just skyrocket when, high fructose corn sugar and the GMOs started to kick in. Diabetes tripled within the first year and stuff like that. And I look back, and my wife and I talk about this stuff all the time. We say, when we were kids, did you know as many people had cancer as nowadays? And some people go, oh, it's the internet. I said, listen, I grew up in Warren, Rhode Island. If I sneezed, all my cousins knew about it in 10 minutes. It was faster than the internet where I came from. If someone was sick and didn't go to school, the whole school knew in by second period. So it wasn't that. Yep. People just didn't have those problems. It was adult onset diabetes, I don't even think existed when I was a kid. I'm pretty sure I'd never heard of it until, I was maybe a teenager, stuff like that. And, I think it makes a big difference. I think people overlook a lot of things, and I think you're right. Like your story, I'm listening to it, and I'm like, yeah, we're bald with beards. But at the same time, I'm like, that 280, I was 270 at 5'8.5". And, I was strong. But again, my head was purple because I couldn't breathe. I had nosebleeds from the high blood pressure. And it didn't take until, finally it clicked when it was this is not good anymore. Like that meathead. It took me a little longer than you, I think. I was about 38 or 39 when it clicked. But I mean, I think everybody, honestly, I think even Boston Lloyd now is going through I don't know if you've been following what's going on with him. He is kind of getting out of the experimentation with the drugs and stuff like he was doing. Like everybody comes to a point in their life, I think, where they go, what the hell am I doing? Like, I'm just not happy doing this anymore. And you kind of shift directions. And that's interesting. I mean, I've known, about your story and stuff, but I didn't know that much of it, kind of lined up with, what I went through. It's pretty interesting. So if people want to get a hold of you, how would they get a hold of you?
It's the Dolce Diet. So you go to the dolcediet.com, on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, on YouTube. You type in the Dolce Diet, all of our stuff pops up.
Awesome. Well, Mike, thank you so much for your time, man. I really appreciate it. I know you're busy out there in Vegas, and I'll be out in Vegas in a few weeks, and I'll definitely hit you up when I get there, and we'll, I don't know, we'll watch a fight or eat, or we'll eat some grass-fed beef.
Buddy, I got some spots. You travel quite a bit, so you'll see Vegas, man. We can get organic wild caught delivered to your house at 2 a.m. if you want. That's the beauty about living out here. Yeah, this is the city truly that never sleeps.
Awesome. Well, cool. I'll hit you up when I get out there, man.
What's that?
I'll hit you up when I get out there. We'll eat it.
I look forward to it, brother. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks for having me on your channel and sharing this little bit of the story with you and your audience. And I'm a member of your audience, so it's awesome, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate it, man. We'll talk to you soon, brother.
All right, brother. Talk soon. Bye.